Hi, my name is Emily Harrison and I'm 37 years old. Today, I want to share the story of how my life changed when I was 28. I'm married to David, a wonderful man who's always been by my side, and at that time, we were living one of the happiest moments of our lives. When we found out I was pregnant, it felt like all our dreams were coming true. We couldn't wait to share the news with our friends and family. During the first months of pregnancy, everything seemed to be going perfectly. We felt like we were living a dream, surrounded by love and support from everyone around us. We started making plans for the future, picking out names, setting up the baby's room, and imagining what our life would be like when our child finally arrived. Every day was filled with anticipation and hope, and I couldn't have been more grateful for this new phase of my life. When I was 6 months pregnant, we decided to take a trip to a town 200 kilometers away to visit some friends we hadn't seen in a long time. We were excited to share our happiness with them and spend some time together. With the car packed with gifts and good vibes, we set off that morning, ready to enjoy a few days of rest and fun. Trip started off perfectly. The weather was nice, and David and I spent the 2-hour drive talking about the future, laughing, and listening to our favorite songs. Each kilometer we traveled felt like it brought us closer to the life we were building together. We were full of hope, imagining what it would be like when we returned home, even more connected with our friends and with new memories to add to our story. When we arrived at our destination, we were greeted with warm hugs and wide smiles. Our friends were thrilled to hear about our pregnancy, and the weekend was filled with lively conversations, great food, and laughter late into the night. It felt like the universe was on our side, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that nothing could go wrong. Those days were a welcome escape from routine and a pre-celebration of the new life that was on its way. However, as the weekend came to a close, we started preparing for the trip back home. We were sad to say goodbye, but eager to return home and continue getting ready for our baby's arrival. We packed the car again, said our goodbyes with hugs and promises of future visits, and then hit the road back to our city. We were content and happy, unaware that this peaceful journey was about to take an unexpected turn. On the way back home, the sky was overcast, but we still expected nothing but a smooth trip. David was at the wheel, and I was relaxed in the passenger seat, watching the scenery pass by the window. We were talking about our plans for the following week, about how we wanted to paint Brianna's nursery, and about the preparations for the baby shower that was coming up. Everything seemed calm and under control. Suddenly, everything changed in a matter of seconds. In a split second, something on the road caught David's attention. He tried to swerve, but the car lost control. I remember the sound of the tires screeching on the asphalt, my heart racing, and the feeling of time slowing down as the car spun off the road. Amid the chaos, I closed my eyes, instinctively holding my belly, trying to protect Brianna, who was growing inside me. When we finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. When I opened my eyes, everything seemed to be in slow motion. Car was on its side, and the adrenaline made my senses fuzzy. David was conscious beside me, groaning in pain, but even so, his first concern was for me and Brianna. I tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through me, and something told me that something was very wrong. The shock of the accident hadn't yet worn off, and little did we know that this was just the beginning of a series of challenges we were about to face. The minutes after the accident were a blur of sirens, unfamiliar voices, and caring hands helping us out of the car. We were rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors and nurses moved quickly around us, asking questions, assessing our conditions. Their concern was evident, but in my mind there was only one question repeated over and over. Is Brianna okay? Is she going to be okay? Time seemed to stop as we waited for news. David was by my side, holding my hand with all the strength he had left, despite the obvious pain in his broken arm. But none of that mattered to us at that moment. All we wanted was to hear that Brianna was safe, that all of this was just a scare. However, when the doctor walked into the room, the look on his face said it all. The news he brought was like a stab in the heart.
Brianna didn't make it,
He said, his voice gentle but heavy with sadness. In that instant, my whole world crumbled. The physical pain from the accident disappeared, giving way to an overwhelming emptiness. I could barely process the words. David held me, and we both cried silently, sharing a pain that no one should ever have to bear. What should have been the start of a new life turned into an unimaginable nightmare, and at that moment we had no idea how we would move forward. After the news of Brianna's loss, everything became a blur of pain and disbelief. I felt disconnected from the world around me, as if I were floating in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Doctors and nurses were constantly around us, monitoring my condition and David's, but everything seemed distant, irrelevant. The only thing I could think about was how, in just a few hours, the joy we had shared had turned into unbearable pain. While David was receiving care for his broken arm, the doctors became increasingly concerned about my condition. I was weak, and a deep pain began to spread through my body. They talked among themselves, their words blending into a tangle of medical terms I couldn't understand. Soon, I was rushed in for a series of more detailed tests while David watched, helpless, not knowing what more was to come. Then came the second devastating news. Tests revealed that the impact of the accident had caused severe internal damage, and I was at risk of severe hemorrhaging. The doctors explained that the situation was critical and that I would need emergency surgery. I barely had time to process what was happening. Everything happened so fast that I found myself being wheeled into the operating room, praying that somehow this was just a nightmare I could wake up from. As I was wheeled into the operating room, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I clung to the hope that somehow the doctors would be able to fix everything and that David and I could start healing from the loss of Brianna. However, as the anesthesia began to take effect, a deep sense of fear settled over me. I knew something very serious was happening, but I couldn't imagine the extent of what was to come. The surgery was long and complicated. During the procedure, the doctors did everything they could to stabilize my body and contain the damage caused by the accident. While I was unconscious, the medical team worked tirelessly to save my life. But by the end of the surgery, my body went into shock and I didn't wake up. To give my body a chance to recover, the doctors decided to put me in a medically induced coma. David was informed that I was in a coma and that the next few days would be critical. He was exhausted, physically and emotionally, with his arm in a cast and his heart shattered by the loss of Brianna. When he received the news, he could hardly believe the severity of the situation. Everything had happened so fast, and the person he loved most was now in a critical state between life and death. The days that followed would be the hardest of his life as he waited, helplessly, for a sign that I would come back to him. The days that followed were a blur of darkness and silence for me. While my body fought to recover, my mind floated in a deep void, unaware of what was happening around me. I had no idea how much time had passed or what was happening in the outside world. It was as if I were trapped in a place without time, without pain, but also without hope. Meanwhile, David remained by my side day after day, waiting for any sign of improvement. He talked to me, held my hand, and prayed that I would wake up. He told me about the visits from our friends and family, about the support we were receiving, but I couldn't hear any of it. For him, those days were a mix of fear and determination as he tried to keep hope alive that I would come back to him. After 10 long days, something finally changed. My body started responding to treatment, and the doctors decided it was time to bring me back. Slowly, I began to emerge from the coma, like someone waking from a deep and disturbing sleep. The lights and sounds around me were hazy, and I felt as if I were relearning how to exist in the world. But with consciousness came the pain, a pain I didn't know was about to become much more intense. When I finally woke up, the first thing I noticed was the soft light of the hospital room and the distant sound of machines around me. I felt pressure on my hand, and as I slowly turned my head, I saw David sitting beside me. His eyes were full of relief and concern, but he smiled when he realized I was conscious. I tried to speak, but my voice was weak, and the words came out slowly. David gently squeezed my hand, telling me everything was okay and that I was safe now. The physical pain soon hit me, a dull, constant ache in my body. I tried to understand what had happened, but my mind was still foggy from the coma and medications. All I knew was that I was awake and that David was by my side, and at that moment, that was all that mattered to me. Just being conscious and alive was a relief. A few hours later, the doctor came into the room, accompanied by a psychologist and my parents, who were clearly shaken. David stayed by my side, holding my hand firmly. The doctor began to explain the situation, but his words seemed distant. Then David, his voice choked with emotion, said,
Emily, during the surgery they did everything they could, but they discovered that your uterus was severely damaged, and to save your life they had to remove it.
His words sounded like thunder in my ears, bringing a new wave of pain. On top of losing Brianna, I would never be able to have another child. The shock and sadness enveloped me like a heavy cloud, and I could barely process the reality of what was happening. After David told me the truth, I felt as if the world had collapsed around me. The news that I would never be able to have children again was like a deep wound in my soul, already bruised by the loss of Brianna. I knew the doctor's decision had saved my life, but at the same time, it felt like an essential part of me had been torn away. The emotional pain outweighed the physical, and I felt lost, not knowing how to move forward. My parents were by my side, trying to comfort me, but I could barely hear their words. The psychologist also tried to reach out, offering words of support and understanding, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I felt empty, as if the hope I had for the future had been ripped away along with my uterus. It was hard to process what this meant for me and David, and the silence that fell over the room was heavy and suffocating. In the days that followed, David was my rock. Even while carrying his own pain, he stayed by my side, trying to help me find strength. But at that moment, I couldn't see a way out of the darkness. All I could think about was Brianna, the future we had lost, and the impossibility of having another child. What should have been the beginning of a new life now felt like the end of a fundamental part of who I was. In the days that followed, the reality of what had happened began to sink in, bringing with it a deep and overwhelming sadness. However, amidst all the suffering, there were moments when I forced myself to remember that despite everything, I was still alive. The severity of the accident had left me with injuries beyond the emotional. My foot was broken and I couldn't walk, which made everything even more difficult. But I knew I needed to find a way to move forward, no matter how small the progress. David, my parents, and the medical team encouraged me to focus on small daily victories. Even the simplest tasks, like sitting up in bed or doing a few exercises with the help of the physical therapists, became goals to achieve. I knew that to recover, both physically and emotionally, I needed to hold on to these small accomplishments. Every movement, every improvement, no matter how insignificant it seemed, was a reminder that I was still here and that somehow I needed to find the strength to keep going. It was in this process that I began to understand that healing wouldn't be quick or easy. There were days when everything felt unbearable, when the pain and despair consumed me. But there were also moments when I could see a small ray of hope. I tried to focus on those moments, knowing that to move forward I needed to take one step at a time. Recognizing that I had almost lost my life helped me appreciate every little improvement, and even though the journey would be long, I knew I was on the right path to eventually find some peace. As the days passed, I began to realize that despite the immense pain, I wasn't alone on this journey. David was with me every step of the way, even in the moments when I felt most helpless. He made a point of reminding me that we didn't have to go through this alone. My parents were also always nearby, offering unconditional support. Even with their hearts broken by what had happened, they never stopped offering a shoulder to cry on and comforting words. But it wasn't just the support of my family that kept me going. There was also the constant thought of Brianna. Knowing that I had a daughter, even if she had been born to heaven, gave me the strength to keep going. I knew that somehow I needed to honor her memory, and that meant finding the courage to move forward. Amidst my tears and prayers, I promised Brianna that I would do my best to heal, to find peace, and to carry the love I felt for her with me every day. David, despite dealing with his own pain and a broken arm, always found a way to make me smile, even if just for a brief moment. He knew that my physical recovery would be slow and that besides the broken foot, there was a need to heal what wasn't visible. He helped me with my daily exercises, encouraging me to take each step with patience and determination. When I felt exhausted and frustrated, he reminded me that we had already overcome so much together and that we could continue to overcome one day at a time. With Brianna in my heart and the love of my family around me, I began to find the strength I needed to continue my journey, even though the path was still uncertain. After a few weeks in the hospital, I was finally discharged. I was still physically fragile, with a cast on my foot and limited movement, but the doctor said the most important thing now was to be at home, surrounded by those I loved. However, before any attempt to move forward, there was one last painful task we needed to face: Brianna's burial. The funeral was small and intimate, just me, David, and Brianna's grandparents. We chose a quiet spot, a small cemetery where the sound of the wind through the trees and the bird songs created a peaceful atmosphere. When the time came to say goodbye, the weight of reality finally hit us. I held David's hand tightly as Brianna's coffin was lowered into the ground, and the pain we felt was indescribable. Still, there was something almost serene about that moment, as if we were closing one chapter and starting another, even if we weren't ready. As the ceremony went on, a light drizzle began to fall. It wasn't a heavy rain, but rather a gentle blessing that seemed to cover all of us with a mantle of peace. I felt the cold water on my face, and for a moment a sense of calm enveloped me. It was as if God was sending us a sign, a reminder that even amidst the pain, we were not alone. David pulled me closer, and there, under that gentle rain, we shared a moment of deep connection. We believed that rain was God's way of telling us that Brianna was at peace, that she would always be with us, and that somehow we would find a way to move forward. After Brianna's burial, returning home was an emotional and physical challenge. Every corner of the house brought back memories of what could have been, of the future we had dreamed of together. But at the same time, there was a new determination within me. The gentle rain during the funeral had given us a kind of peace, a feeling that somehow Brianna would always be with us. And that helped me take the first steps toward healing. David and I began adjusting to a new routine, one that involved more care and patience. My body was still recovering, and physical therapy remained an essential part of my daily life. Although it was difficult, I forced myself to remember that every small advance was a victory. More than that, I knew I needed to honor Brianna's memory by living the life she didn't have the chance to live. That didn't mean ignoring the pain, but rather finding a way to live with it, to transform the pain into something that could help me move forward. The weeks turned into months, and gradually I began to realize that the healing process was a continuous journey. It wasn't linear, and there were days when the weight of the loss seemed unbearable. But there were also days when I could find small moments of joy and gratitude. David and I learned to support each other, to give space for our emotions, but also to find comfort in each other. We knew we would never forget Brianna, but we also knew that together we could find a new way to move forward, keeping her memory alive in our hearts. A year had passed since the day we said goodbye to Brianna. It was a period marked by deep sadness and small glimpses of hope. During that time, David and I focused on healing our wounds, rebuilding our lives, and finding a new way to move forward. Pain of loss was still there, but we began to see the possibility of a different future, one where we could once again bring love and joy into our home. Even though Brianna was always in our hearts, we realized that there was still so much love to give. And that feeling led us to consider adoption. The idea came up naturally during our late-night conversations, where we imagined what it would be like to open our home to a child who needed us. We knew that adoption wouldn't replace Brianna, but it would be a way to transform our pain into something positive and to honor the life she never had the chance to live. With open hearts and a renewed sense of purpose, we decided to join the adoption waiting list. We felt this was the next step in our journey, a new opportunity to expand our family and create new memories. With Brianna's memory always present, we were ready to welcome a new life, knowing that the love we felt for her would guide us through this new chapter. Joining the adoption waiting list was a moment full of emotion for us. We knew we were embarking on a new journey, with its own uncertainties and challenges, but also with the promise of something beautiful on the horizon. We filled out the forms, went through interviews and evaluations, and shared our story with the social workers, explaining our desire to give a loving home to a child in need. During the process, we decided not to specify any preferences for race, gender, or whether the child would be an only child. We wanted to leave the door open for whatever God had in store for us, trusting that the right child would come into our lives at the right time. This decision brought us peace, knowing that our hearts were ready to welcome any child in need of love and care. The wait, however, stretched out over 2 long years. There were moments of anxiety and doubt when we wondered if the day we would receive the much-anticipated call would ever come. But despite the uncertainty, there was also a deep sense of purpose and hope. With each step we took, we felt closer to finally welcoming a child into our arms. Throughout this time, we kept Brianna in our thoughts, believing that, in some way, she was guiding us on this journey. Her memory gave us the strength to keep going, even when the wait seemed endless. We knew that adoption would be a new way to celebrate life, to create a new beginning, and to honor the love we felt for our daughter. After 2 years of waiting, the unexpected finally happened. It was an ordinary morning, like so many others we had passed during that period. David was at work, and I was at home busy with daily tasks when the phone rang. As I answered, I heard the social worker's voice on the other end, sounding more excited than usual. My heart began to race as he said they had found children for us. The social worker told us about 2 siblings, a 4-year-old boy named Ethan and a 2-year-old girl named Lily. They had gone through a very difficult situation, being removed from a home where they faced severe neglect. Their biological parents, caught in a cycle of drug addiction, often left Ethan and Lily alone for long periods. Ethan, just 4 years old, tried to take care of his little sister Lily, but the children spent days without proper meals, without hygiene, and were exposed to a dangerous and unstable environment. Due to the strong bond between Ethan and Lily, the social worker explained that they couldn't be separated. Any family that adopted them would have to take both together. Hearing about the children's story, I felt a pang in my heart. Life had been extremely hard on them, but I knew that David and I could give them the love and home they so desperately needed. When David came home and heard the news, his reaction was immediate and without hesitation. We agreed that we wanted to meet them and, if all went well, bring them home. Didn't matter what their past held. What mattered was that, finally, we could offer them the love and stability we had longed to share. The thought of having not just one but two children in our lives filled our hearts with a joy we hadn't felt in a long time. We were ready to welcome Ethan and Lily, to give them a safe home and to build a future full of love together. With hearts full of hope, we prepared to meet our children. The day we finally met Ethan and Lily will be forever etched in our memories. The social worker arranged a meeting at a shelter where the children were temporarily staying. David and I were nervous but also excited. We had spent the night before talking about how the meeting might go, imagining their little faces and hoping they would feel the safety and love we were ready to offer. When we arrived, we were greeted by a caregiver who led us to a small playroom. The room was full of colorful toys, but I could hardly focus on anything other than the anticipation of seeing Ethan and Lily for the first time. Finally, the door opened and the two of them timidly walked in, holding hands. Ethan, with his big brown eyes and protective look, held Lily's hand, who seemed a little scared but curious. It was clear that, even so young, they had already been through so much together. David and I knelt down to their level, trying to appear as welcoming as possible. Ethan. "Hi, Lily," we said softly, trying to break the ice. Ethan looked at us, hesitant at first, but gradually relaxed, especially when David handed him a small toy truck. Lily, still holding her brother's hand, watched us with curious eyes, and when I offered her a rag doll, she finally smiled. That smile, though small, was a sign that we could build a connection. The relief and joy we felt were indescribable. We spent the afternoon playing and talking with them, letting them take their time to get used to us. Every little gesture, every laugh was a step toward becoming a family. At the end of the day, as we said goodbye, Ethan looked at me and asked, "You'll come back, right?" And in that moment, I knew something special had begun. We promised we would, and we left that meeting with our hearts full of hope and gratitude for having met our future children. After that first meeting, David and I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan and Lily. We felt that, in some way, they were already a part of our lives. In the following days, we had more visits with the children, and each time we saw them, the connection between us grew stronger. Ethan, with his protective and curious nature, began to open up more, asking questions about our home and what it would be like to live with us. Lily, despite her initial shyness, gradually started to show more confidence, holding our hands more firmly and smiling more often. The transition to bring the children home was carefully planned by the social worker, who helped us understand the challenges we might face along the way. We were prepared for the fact that the adaptation might take time, but the idea of finally having Ethan and Lily in our home filled us with indescribable joy. We prepared their rooms, filling them with toys, clothes, and little details that we hoped would make them feel safe and loved. The day we brought Ethan and Lily home was emotional. They arrived with few bags but a world of stories and experiences we were just beginning to understand. Ethan explored every corner of the house with curiosity, while Lily snuggled into my lap, holding tightly to her rag doll. Seeing those children in our home, interacting with the spaces we had prepared with so much care, brought new meaning to what family was. In the first days, there were moments of insecurity and adjustment, both for them and for us. Ethan, used to being Lily's caretaker, took time to fully trust that we were there to care for them. But with patience and a lot of love, we began to build a family routine. David and I made sure to be present at every important moment: meals, bedtime stories, games, and playtime. Each day, we saw them feeling more comfortable, more secure, and what began as a fragile bond transformed into a deep and unbreakable connection. The months that followed were a journey of growth and discovery for our new family. Ethan and Lily became more and more accustomed to the routine of the house, and what had once been a place full of expectations and uncertainties was now filled with laughter, stories, and moments of affection. Mornings were now filled with the sound of children running through the house, and evenings with the calm of being together, reading stories, and sharing the love we had longed to give. David and I learned more about our children, their preferences, fears, and the little details that made them happy. Ethan, with his curiosity and intelligence, became a little explorer, always seeking to learn more about the world around him. Lily, on the other hand, found security in the affection she received, blossoming into a joyful and lively little girl. Watching our children develop and grow in an environment of love and care brought us indescribable joy. But despite the happiness we lived, the thought of Brianna never left us. We knew she would always be part of our lives, and we tried to honor her memory in small ways like bedtime prayers or conversations about what she might have been. It was a way to keep her alive in our hearts, even as we gave all our love to Ethan and Lily. One day, while Ethan and Lily were playing in the attic where we kept some memories from the past, Ethan made a discovery that brought a wave of emotions. He found a small wooden box hidden among other old items. Curious as always, he opened the box and inside it found a baby outfit carefully folded, along with a small stuffed bunny beside it. The soft colors and the faint smell of lavender made Ethan hesitate for a moment, feeling that there was something special about this find. "Whose is this, Mom?" Ethan asked, coming down the stairs with the box in his hands. When I saw what he was holding, my heart stopped for a second. That was one of the few items we had bought for Brianna before the accident. David, seeing the scene, also felt the impact of the discovery. We knelt down in front of Ethan, with Lily silently observing beside him. "This was Brianna's outfit, our first daughter," I explained softly, gently stroking Ethan's curious face. "God wanted her to be by his side, but we always keep her in our hearts." Ethan looked at me seriously, as if trying to understand the weight of my words. David placed his hand on his shoulder and continued, "She will always be part of our family, just like you and Lily." There was a moment of silence as Ethan processed what he had learned. Then, with the simplicity and wisdom that only a child can have, he handed the stuffed bunny to Lily and said, "I think our sister Brianna would be happy if Lily played with her bunny." A soft smile appeared on Lily's lips as she hugged the bunny lovingly. In that moment, we knew that, in some way, Brianna had found her place in our new family. Not as a sad memory, but as a part of the love we shared, something that united the past and present in a way we could never have predicted. That simple gesture from Ethan was like a sign that our family was complete, not just by those present, but also by those who would always be in our hearts. It was a powerful reminder that the pain we endured, as devastating as it was, led us to this moment of peace and fulfillment. We had to go through all of that to get here, to learn to value love, family, and the miracle of a second chance. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I've left a card with 2 more suggestions.